My name is Bren Smith. I'm the owner of Thimble Island Ocean Farm, and we're here in the Thimble Islands in Long Island Sound. And I'm born and raised in Newfoundland, Canada, high school dropout, and have fished all over the globe. I fished in Gloucester, up in Newfoundland, and then I was in the Bering Sea for a bunch of years. And, you know, that was the height of industrialized fishing. We were tearing up entire ecosystems with our trawls, chasing fewer and fewer fish further and further out to sea. So it was completely unsustainable. In fact, a lot of the fish I was catching was going to McDonald's for their fish witch sandwich. It really caused a wake-up call for a lot of folks in my generation. I was actually out in the Bering Sea, and the cod stocks crashed. And, you know, thousands of people thrown out of work, canneries shuttered, and it really taught me that you can build up an economy and a culture over hundreds of years, and if you don't protect the resources, an ecosystem collapse can wipe it out in a matter of years. And that's when we really begin to realize that issues like overfishing, like climate change, that they're not environmental issues for a lot of us that work on the ocean. They're economic issues. I mean, there's going to be no food, no jobs on a dead planet. When I realized this wasn't sustainable, I went on this search for sustainability. I remade myself as an oysterman. And what oysters taught me was that Mother Nature created these technologies millions of years ago designed to mitigate our harm. We don't need advanced technologies. Mother Nature has seaweeds and shellfish which sequester 5 times more carbon than land-based plants, filter 50 gallons of water a day per oyster, pulling nitrogen out of our system. I mean, my job as a steward of the ocean is to take Mother Nature's technologies and grow them. And it's pretty simple. So the beautiful thing about if you grow just restorative species is there's zero inputs. We don't need fresh water, we don't need animal feed, we don't need fertilizer, we don't need land, making it hands down the most sustainable form of food production on the planet. So kelp is this beautiful seaweed. It's like the gateway drug to a new cuisine. It's one of the fastest growing plants on Earth. It soaks up 5 times more carbon than land-based plants. It's called the sequoia of the sea. But it's just the beginning. I mean, we're starting with kelp, but there are 10,000 edible plants in the ocean. Part of the plant we can turn into kelp noodles. But then this, which is biofouling, we turn into fertilizer, and we can turn into animal feed. If you provide a seaweed diet to cows, you get a 90% reduction in methane output. It's stunning, and cows, sheep, goats, have been eating kelp for hundreds of years. Hebrides Islands, Maine, all sorts of places. You know, the volume's stunning. We can do 10 to 20 tons of kelp per acre, 150,000 shellfish. Now, you scale this up, if you were to take a network of our farms totaling the size of Washington State, technically you could feed the world. If you took 5% of U.S. territorial waters and farmed in our style, you could create 50 million direct jobs and sequester the equivalent carbon of 20 million cars. Our farms also help mitigate acidification. The kelp creates something called a halo effect, which reduces the acidity in the oceans, which then allow our oysters and other shellfish to grow thicker shells and not be as susceptible to acidification. So I mean, climate change was supposed to be this 100-year sort of slow lobster boil, and instead it's here and now. Luckily, as fishermen, we can transition to something that keeps that core and have the pride of helping feed my country, and that's just so exciting. I can be part of, you know, the army that's going to help hopefully save the planet.
If we put 10 units of CO2 in the atmosphere, 10 very large units of CO2 in the atmosphere, about 5 stay in the atmosphere, and about 2.5 go into plants, and about 2.5 goes into the ocean. So you've got an acidic ocean, so how do you deal with that? Now, nature handles this problem by making more shells, which is the marine snow idea, that little beasties grow in the water, they make calcium carbonate shells, those shells fall. The problem with that is the planet loves to operate on timescales of millions of years, and we don't. So, question becomes, can you speed that process up?
We have to investigate all our options. There are more experimental hypotheses that still need to be tested. One solution may lie in a microscopic community of life called marine snow.
So, fundamentally, what do we need? Well, we need this planet as it was. We have to bring it in the state that was 200 years ago. Higher concentrations of carbon dioxide, they increase acidity of the ocean. The oceans are losing their ability to capture carbon from the atmosphere. And we have to do something about it. We have to help these systems which cycle carbon between the atmosphere, between the plants on the land, and between the oceans. And with marine snow, it just needs a little help from us. The main products will be removal of carbon dioxide and the production of oxygen. What we can do is insert into the ocean very small, minute amounts of iron, but very, very little. So it doesn't have anything to do with that term fertilization. To give you a measure, we need altogether about 6 kilograms of iron for initiating this process on 100,000 square kilometers of the Southern Oceans. The cells form organic matrix, which is the foundation for the formation of the marine snow. It is then when the matrix appears, it becomes very attractive for cyanobacteria and heterotrophic bacteria, which colonize these particles and then actively grow. And then we just let them do their job because they can stay suspended for a very long period of time. We tracked these marine snow particles for more than 4 months. So they can float around and sequester organic matter, and when they become heavy, they simply sink down to the seafloor. The speed of this change and increase in the concentrations and temperature, we must act, and we can. I'm 100% positive that we can achieve reorganization of human activities to work together with nature and not against it.
Science has long proven we have existing technologies that work, and they are already being implemented. It's just become a matter of political will and scale. We need a multitude of solutions moving forward simultaneously. In order to solve this crisis, it is critical we move to 100% renewable energy now.
So the top 5 solutions, number 2 was onshore wind, and that wasn't a surprise. Onshore wind, though being much greater than solar, was a surprise to us. Solar was number 8 and 10, actually.
The sun is the largest resources we have. All the other resources pale compared to the sun. We have known that for a long time. We just never understood how to harvest it in an economic way. That's what's different now. Solar PV is in a stage where we're already lower than fossil fuel. Well, solar has come a long way. Carter in the 80s already installed solar on the White House. Reagan teared it down later on. And only in 2001, when Germany started to deploy solar on a large scale, we have been getting the benefit of economy of scale. Eventually, we will be able to power the entire electrical grids with solar and wind. And all we need is wind and storage and solar and storage. So if we want to power the entire United States with photovoltaic, we will need about 30,000 square miles in area. That would give us enough to power all the power grids in every state of the United States. Well, Mount Signal is a project that powers about 70,000 homes in San Diego. The second phase, the power is going to be wheeled to Southern California. The price of electricity that we produce at Mount Signal is already lower than fossil fuels. It's also a price that delivers fuel price certainty to the utility. The price is flat over the next 25 years, not something that you get from any other fossil fuel energy. We have integrated so much solar in California already. 10 years ago, people would have said, no, that's not really possible. Well, here we are. Solar is covering already up to 25% of California. The ratepayer had no material increase in pricing, and we're still alive. All works. And we have been able to reduce carbon on the way there. Over the last years, we saw now utilities volunteering to buy solar. We see this mindset shifting. We still underappreciate the value that PV brings. People do not comprehend that in 5 years, we will have PV at much lower price. We will be able to dispatch it at night, and you combine that with wind, you get this paradigm where we are truly living in a 100% renewable environment. And this is feasible. We don't need any new invention for that. We know all the technology. We just need to make sure that the people responsible for the planning of resources, for the infrastructure planning, understand that this is a different technology and it will get cheaper over time.
Coal is coming back. Clean coal is coming back. 100%.
My administration is putting an end to the war on coal. Going to have clean coal, really clean coal.
It's difficult enough sometimes to communicate science to the public. Now you take that challenge and you add to it a concerted effort by fossil fuel interests and the front groups that they fund to pollute the discourse over climate change, to confuse the public, to confuse policymakers. We need to transform our energy sector, move away from fossil fuel energy towards renewable energy. Well, that's rather inconvenient for the powerful fossil fuel interests who have many millions of dollars invested in our continued addiction to fossil fuels. And they've fought tooth and nail to maintain that addiction, in part by attacking the science, linking climate change to that behavior, the burning of fossil fuels.
A question that we get asked a lot is, how do we know that the CO2 rise in the atmosphere is because of human activity? And the answer is that we leave fingerprints all over the atmosphere. And one of the fingerprints that we leave on the atmosphere is via what we call carbon-14, or radioactive carbon. So when we burn coal, oil, and natural gas, we leave an imprint on the atmosphere of what we call negative carbon-14, or less carbon-14. Because fossil fuels are so old, there's no carbon-14 left. It's all decayed away. We can actually measure very accurately how much fossil fuels we burn by measuring C14 in the atmosphere. It is nature's verification system that we have.
They persuaded enough people and sowed enough doubt that it's making it more difficult than in the past to actually get anything done about climate change. And that's really depressing.
And the fact is that the agenda that many of these fossil fuel corporations and those who are running them are engaged in is malicious in the danger it's creating and the havoc that it is wreaking on our planet.
So we've got a bunch of people who are literally profiting off the death of life on Earth. I think that some climate denial, particularly the well-funded climate denial that is being done by people who know better, rises to the level of a crime against humanity that probably should be prosecuted in The Hague.
While climate deniers have succeeded in delaying action, a much more ominous problem has emerged. Very recently, scientists have recorded increasing levels of methane gas in the atmosphere. Methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, has the potential to increase temperatures even further. Increased methane is a sign that we are reaching a critical tipping point. But where is it coming from? And how much will it accelerate climate disruption? Scientists are racing to find out.
So we are in front of the University of Wyoming Mobile Laboratory. We have different instruments inside that measure what's in the air that we are breathing right now. It's doing that in real time. And we are able like that to chase emission sources and plumes and understand where sources of pollution are located, what activities are going on that lead to enhanced methane.
Inside of our lab, we have a couple instruments. We have a proton transfer reaction time of flight mass spec to measure volatile organics like benzene, toluene. And then we also have a Picaro cavity ring down to measure methane concentrations. We can see data from these instruments in real time due to an inlet we have up on our mast above the van, which pulls air in and feeds into our instruments.
So we found with aerial and road mapping that we have more sources of methane in areas where we extract the gas than we expected. And to really pinpoint where there are leaks of methane, you need to be very close to the sources. And the mobile lab gives us the flexibility to pinpoint where we see the largest leaks. The company has drilled brand new megapad, 22 wells in the middle of renewed urban development in Western Greeley. This is a site that had a lot of contention given its size and its location. So the local community, from what I've heard, is not really kept up to breath on what's going on at the site. There's a huge sound wall around the operation. And the state is not really maybe doing its best at facilitating the communication. We saw operations going on with a lot of flaring. It seems very large volume of gas. The yellow color of the flame tells you it's not complete combustion. So we are going to continue doing those drives to understand those sources, but also to track what the local population may be exposed to. So some oil and gas producing regions have such a large concentration of methane in the atmosphere above them that you can see it from space. And that's something that was described a few years back for the Four Corners region.
And that's really the key for us to be like detectives and map where we see the largest sources of emissions.
So in 2014, NASA scientists, in cooperation with NOAA, University of Michigan, and other scientists, identified a methane hotspot the size of Delaware in the Four Corners region. That methane hotspot is the largest accumulation of methane gases in the United States. This ranch, this spot that we're on, is approximately ground zero. If you were able to identify a middle for that Delaware-shaped cloud, it might very well be right here where we're standing. And they've closely identified the cause of that methane hotspot to be predominantly the emissions from drilling, such as this site, as well as coal and other fossil fuels. So the methane hotspot is identified basically because of the technology that NOAA and NASA had following the advent of the FLIR cameras, which are the infrared cameras that let us identify the leaks and vents and flares that cause the methane hotspot to accumulate. You have to think of it in its full sense, and that is 60 years and more of leaking, venting, flaring, and careless practices here in the San Juan Basin, over 1 million acres, in total 30,000 wells, that have caused that methane hotspot to finally accumulate and stand as evidence of what natural gas drilling ultimately results in. People lose sight of the fact that the conventional wells created the methane hotspot and that they are a daily culprit. So this is a conventional natural gas well. This is very typical equipment throughout the San Juan Basin and many gas fields across America. This one is leaking pretty badly from some of the standard equipment that's on it. This just requires, honestly, a crescent wrench, a little bit of Teflon tape, some attention will fix this leak. If I had a single wish, my wish would be to pull an investor in oil and gas here and stand them where I'm standing. Let them see that leak. Let them see that times 18,000 in the San Juan Basin and get them to stop obstructing a federal rule that stays in place to protect my family, to protect taxpayers across New Mexico, and provide federal, fair, and equal protection across the western states. Let's get those guys out of the boardroom right here on this well location. Let them look at that leak that can be easily fixed. And when I found out that the EPA Administrator, Scott Pruitt, knew that the data had come in that methane leaks and the chemicals that come with them harm children to a greater degree than they did to me, I was just outraged that he would try again to roll back the federal protections for us. You know, if someone came onto my ranch with the stated objective of harming my children, it would be over my dead body.